Hello and welcome to Cryptid by Region, Chile. Today I was going over my list of topics I could talk about, and I realized that without a shadow of a doubt, we needed to revisit the series that doesn't get enough love since its name change. Longtime subscriber and a frequent suggestion giver, James Kasusnik, recommended that we look into Chile quite a while ago. So here we are in the country that is part of South America, looking for what mysterious beasts are said to roam about its various landscapes. Chile has an incredibly long and interesting history, and while that is really important, it means that I can't go over every detail here. So, in saying that, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. The original inhabitants were Native Americans, with the Araucanians being the most prominent group. Out of that line came the Mapuche people, and are still found in the area today, and were greatly protective of the land. So much so that when the famous Inca Empire decided to expand their territory into Chile, they fought back fiercely and managed to keep them at bay. The first European to step foot in the area was Spanish conquistador Diego de Almagro in 1537. This excursion would be brief, since Diego landed with the hope of finding valuable minerals such as gold, but returned home once he realized there wasn't much to be found. On February 12, 1541, Spanish conquistador Pedro de Valdivia invaded the Southlands and established the city we now know as Santiago de Chile. All would not go as planned, since the Mapuche people greatly resisted this intrusion and fought back against the Spanish. This battle would continue up until the 1880s in what it was called the Aruca War. In fact, Pedro was actually captured and later killed on December 25, 1553, at the Battle of Tucapel by a Mapuche war chief called Lautaro. While brutal, there are various conflicting stories as to how Pedro was killed, with some saying that he was beaten with a club, while others say Lautaro ripped out and ate his still-beating heart. There is one tale of his death that may seem familiar to any Game of Thrones fans out there, where it is claimed that the Mapuche gave him the gold that the Spanish had desired by pouring the molten gold down his throat. See, I told you Chile had an interesting history. Even with the battles, Spain kept a strong hold in the area, although it didn't take long for the people to strive for independence from Spain, with many advocates such as a man named Bernardo O'Higgins. After many civil wars and attempts, a Declaration of Independence was signed on February 12, 1818, and soon after Bernardo would become the President of Chile, which was called the Supreme Director. The name Chile has a debated history. Some say it is derived from the Mapuche word Chile, which meant where the land ends, while others say it came from the first Inca troops who called the land Shiri, which meant freezing cold. The flag may seem very familiar to you, since it looks very similar to the flag of Texas. In fact, it is actually called La Estrella Solitaria, which means the Lone Star. However, it was adopted on October 18, 1817, and Texas adopted theirs on January 25, 1839. Who designed the flag is disputed, with some saying it was Bernardo O'Higgins' Minister of War, Jose Ignacio Centeno, while others say that a man named Gregorio de Andia Varela actually was the first to draw the design. Regardless of who designed it, there are quite a few powerful meanings behind the flag. The star is to represent a guide to the path of honor and progress. There are three colored stripes on it, with the white being for the snow on the Andes Mountains, the blue symbolizing the sky and possibly Pacific Ocean, and the red standing for the bloodshed that many citizens sacrificed for the country. Chile has a very diverse range of cryptids that seem to be found in just about every area. From a brief count, I uncovered at least 21, but I know I missed some, and of course I can't talk about them all. So starting off, I want to look at the numerous beings that are said to have the ability to fly. The first one doesn't really have a name, but it was called a pterosaur, even though the description doesn't sound anything similar. This creature was seen by miners who were working near the town of Copiapó in 1868. The men looked up and saw a bird-like being that had the head of a locust with giant eyes that were as red as burning coal. Its wings were massive and covered in grayish-colored feathers. The body was long like a serpent and covered in thick, stout bristles. What really made this odd was that the men had claimed that the feathers would make a metallic sound whenever the creature turned its body while flying. Apparently the men were so startled by this sight that they immediately ran to report it to a local zoologist. Immediately the idea came to mind that this might be the earliest sighting of a Mothman, but some of the details don't fit. I considered that this could have been some type of UFO, but in looking at some of the lore, I came across this creature from the Mapuche known as the Puchin. This being was said to be a giant flying snake that had impressive wings. It was said to make a strange whistling sound, and it could paralyze anything it wanted to just by looking directly at it. It would then take advantage of this state and suck the blood of its victim. Interestingly, it seemed to be similar to another famous cryptid, in that it tended to take a taste for sheep and goats. The really odd feature that you rarely see with cryptids of this type is that it was said to be able to change into whatever shape it wished. Tying in with this, I have to mention the alicanto bird that is frequently said to be purely a myth. It is said to be mainly seen at night, and its eyes will shine a strange light. The beak is said to be curved, and it has extremely long legs with giant talons. The body of the bird was said to shine, but it tends to be whatever color of ore that the bird has eaten. You see, this bird is said to feed off of ore from mines. The body will be gold if it ate gold, silver if it found silver, and green if it found a mill of copper. Normally this bird can't fly due to the weight of the ore in its belly, but I can only assume that it could if it hadn't eaten anything. It is said that if a miner sees this bird, that if they follow it, they'll lead them to a rich node of ore. This needs to be done without the bird seeing you, since if it realizes it is being followed, it will turn off its lights from its body and fade into the darkness. Although sometimes it is said that if a person doesn't have a pure heart, the bird will lead the follower to walking off a cliff. While thought to be pure myth, it is said that on May 16, 1832, one such bird led Juan Godoy to the rich silver mine that kicked off the Chilean silver rush. I do have to note that I found it interesting that the original cryptid we talked about was seen by a mine by miners, so maybe it was the alicanto bird, and it isn't just a myth. So moving into a different realm, I would like to talk about a few water-based cryptids. I am hesitant to mention this one, but it is said to be an aquatic creature likened to a Bigfoot or Dogman. Apparently, on June 18, 2000, in Tocopia, a group of teenagers were sitting on a beach enjoying a bonfire. Suddenly they noticed something odd emerging from the water and walking towards them. It was described as being 8 feet tall, it had big eyes, a long snout, and long hair. Apparently the creature was trying to talk to the witnesses as it was moving towards them, all the while making grunting noises. Once it drew near, it put a hand on one of the partygoers' shoulders, turned, and re-entered the water. It was said that where the creature's hand had been, it left a green handprint. That last part reminds me a lot of the story of the green-clawed beast from Indiana. That creature was never seen, but it did leave a green handprint on a woman's leg. Now, do I think that is what happened here? Probably not. But, again, in this series, I'm not here to debunk. Even though you probably can guess what I'm thinking about this story. The next creature is very obscure, and it was known as the monster from the Tugua Tugua Lagoon, which is near San Vicente. This creature has many ancient recordings about it, but there is one interesting story. Apparently in 1784, the being visited a farm of a man named Don Prospero Elso, and it is said that it did great damage and ate many of the man's animals. Finally, an armed group of 100 men snuck up on the creature and managed to capture it alive. It was described as being 3.5 rods long, around 60 feet, and its tail was longer than its body. The tail was utilized in catching prey. Its legs were 1/4 rod long, or 3 feet, and it had massive claws. It had a mane that was so long that it almost entangled the legs. It had a mouth as wide as its face, and there were many teeth that were all 30 centimeters or nearly 12 inches long. The beast had 2 horns on its head that measured 1.5 rods, around 24 feet, long each. Finally, it had long ears that were said to be 3/4 of a rod, 12 feet, long. From the depictions of this creature, it actually had 2 tails, wings, and a human-like face. I really don't know what to make of this one, since it feels like a myth, but the description is so detailed, it even includes the name of the individual's farm who was attacked. According to reports, that lagoon was drained in the 1930s, so there probably aren't any more cases of those creatures. After looking at that terrible picture though, I can say, I hope that is the case. Next up, we probably have one of the most plausible cryptids on this list, and it is known as the Giglioli's whale. While not as fantastic as the previously talked about cryptid, this whale was 60 feet long, looked like a normal whale, but it had 2 dorsal fins that were spaced 6.5 feet apart. It was first spotted by a zoologist by the name of Enrico Hillier Giglioli on September 4th, 1867. While on board a ship called the Magenta, he watched this strange whale for 15 minutes, and it came really close to the vessel. Many wrote this off as a misidentification, but it was spotted again in 1983 off the coast of Scotland by French zoologist Jacques Marugret. Some think that this may have been a genetic defect, but since the sightings were nearly 100 years apart, it may prove that there is another, unknown whale species out there swimming about the oceans. As usual, we are going to look at quite a few honorable mentions, since they were either too obscure, or that I couldn't determine if they were just considered a myth, or a real creature. Normally I reserve the top spot here for Bigfoot, but today we're giving it to its cousin, the Yeti. On a side note, there are Bigfoot such as the Kalama creature and the Usamar. The Yeti doesn't need me to give much information about it, but it is known to roam about the Andes Mountains. Next, I would like to talk about the being simply known as the Escamado, which translates to scales. The name is fitting, since it is apparently a merman type of being that more resembles the creature from the Black Lagoon or the one from the movie The Shape of Water. There are quite a few reports of this being from the Navy and fishing ships, the dates of which range through the years up until the recent 2000s. One popular story from 1967 claims that the creature actually climbed aboard one of the ships and terrorized the crew members. There are a few reports, but most if not all of them are in Spanish, and I'm not well versed in that at all. There are reports of a dogman that terrorized the city of Santiago. I personally couldn't find much information about this event, but I saw a few references to it. From what I could gather, it apparently was aggressive towards the people and their pets. Our next story is a creature that I am almost certain is bound solely in myth, but I felt it would be worth mentioning to you. This is the being known as the Caballo Mendeno Chilote, the Chilote seahorse. Unlike what the name implies, this isn't a normal seahorse, but rather a being that is similar to the Scottish Kelpie. It is said to look like a normal horse, but it has a long muzzle, its tail looks like a fish tail, its mane is a gold color, and its 4 legs have fins on them. This being is said to make its home in the water, and even though I just described it, it is said to be invisible to anyone who doesn't possess magical powers. There is a creature that has been spotted since 2013 that is called the Manta Man. First seen near Bustamante Park, it is a being that was about 6 to 7 feet tall, and it looks similar to a man-sized flying manta ray, although many claim that it more resembled a gargoyle or pterosaur. The skin is said to be leathery, and it has been known to eat dogs. It is very reminiscent to the creatures I talked about in my gargoyle video, where a family from Chile were terrorized by a pack of these beings while driving. There is legend about the El Cuerdo, which looks like a cowhide in the water, but is actually a creature that has eyes on the stalk, sharp teeth, and will burst from the water like a crocodile. It is said to live in most all the lakes, and it will attack humans. It will either drag a person into the water, or use a form of proboscis to puncture the body and suck out the blood and internal organs. Finishing out this super long list is a Dika monster, which is basically a creature that has been seen many times in the Atacama Desert, and it primarily resembles the velociraptors from Jurassic Park. So in ending this, I hope you enjoyed it, and I did justice to Chile. I want to take a moment and thank James Kasusnik again for suggesting this particular location. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.